Hello, thank you for listening to 3 Legacies Recovery Recordings. If you enjoy our program, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to share with a friend. We're also self-supporting, so feel free to contribute to the channel through Venmo at Recovery Recordings 615. Please note that the views expressed on this podcast are solely our individual views and do not represent any official stance of any 12-step program. We are not affiliated with any specific recovery organization, and this content should not be considered as professional advice for alcoholism or addiction.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to 3 Legacies Recovery Recording Podcast. I'm your host, Paul. Today is Sunday, July 27th, 2025, and this is episode 52. You can reach us at recoveryrecordings615@yahoo.com. You can also find us on a private Facebook page. It's called 3 Legacies Recovery Recordings Podcast. You can also obviously find us on YouTube or Audible, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Podomatic, several other major platforms. We're all over the place. We're trying to get out there a little bit. Let's see. I'm super excited about tonight's guest. I have been getting to know him a little bit over the last couple weeks, and he's such an interesting character. Me and him have a lot in common, and I wanted to kind of get into his recovery story tonight. And so I'm super excited to announce Bill S. from Fairfield, Connecticut. How you doing, Bill?
I'm doing great, Paul. Thanks for inviting me tonight. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you. I just getting to know you over the last couple of weeks, man. We hadn't talked much, but we have a lot of things in common. I think you're such an interesting guy. I wanted to just maybe talk a little bit about recovery. Yeah.
Well, let's do the deal.
Yeah.
What caught your attention?
Yeah, well, just a lot of stuff. You know, how you doing this weekend? How's your weekend been?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. I actually spoke at a live AA meeting last night. Something I haven't done in a while. I've spoken at a bunch of Zoom meetings. I haven't spoken at a live meeting.
Oh, nice.
And that was fun.
Yeah,
that was fun.
Very cool. In your area, or was it? Did you have to travel?
Yeah, it was very, very local. One of the guys I've been sponsoring for 18 years is the speaker seeker these days. So my wife, the lady Sarah, spoke there about a month ago, and I went with her. And then I spoke last night, and she came with me.
Very cool.
Actually, our 25-year-old granddaughter, who's not an alcoholic, at least doesn't appear to be at the moment, she came with us and heard my story. So that she said it was really interesting to hear the whole thing in chronological order with all the pieces put together, because I've heard all those bits and pieces before. So.
Yeah.
And I've had the same experience with people I go to meetings with regularly, and you get bits and pieces. Then you go to a speaker meeting, and they're the speaker, and it's like, oh, that's how that all fits together. So
yeah,
he was having one of those.
Nice. And you have been sober since December 7th, 1981, correct?
That is correct.
That's freaking huge. Correct. What is that? How many years is that? 43?
43. Be 44 in December, but we don't count that. It's 43.
43, so, yeah. Nice, yeah. Let's talk a little bit about, so you currently live in Fairfield, Connecticut. How about when you first got sober? Let's talk about, where was you at then?
I was living in the whole Fairfield area. I was born in Sanford, which is 3 towns over, and I've lived in Norwalk, which is 2 towns over. I grew up in Darien, which is 3 towns over, and I've always been in this particular area of southern Connecticut. To southern Connecticut, and we currently live. Sarah and I currently live in a house that's backs up to a salt marsh, a tidal salt marsh. We really live on a little inlet from Long Island Sound.
Wow.
Just beautiful place.
Wow, that's awesome. Nice, man. How about, so is Alcoholics Anonymous, there are a lot of meetings there in your area, or what's that all about?
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, this is, you just can't shake a stick and not hit an AA meeting around here. It wasn't always the case. I don't know, probably 20 years ago. God, it must have been longer than that, more like 25 or probably 30 years ago. My sister-in-law was, in charge of the in charge of the book that we were publishing with all the meetings in Connecticut in it, and it ended up on my computer for a couple of years. And I think at that time there was 1,800 meetings. Well, today there's got to be at least twice that many meetings.
Wow.
At least.
Wow.
State of Connecticut. And of course, I don't think they're even publishing the book anymore.
Yeah. Nowadays there's the AA app or the meeting guide, right?
Yeah. And one of the things I found, I traveled around the country for business a lot for a couple of decades, and it was interesting that the different ways meetings were run in different places.
Yeah.
And then there was we have step meetings here, and I've been in areas of the country where they're like, what, step meetings? We don't do any step meetings. What's that? It's like, okay. And then if you go up to Boston, for instance, they're big on speaker meetings, and they do 3 speakers over, and the 3 speakers speak for an hour, like 20 minutes each. That's it.
Yeah.
And whereas in my area, and the meetings that my sponsor took me to when I first got sober, are basically discussion.
Yeah.
Topic meeting.
Yeah.
And so I did that. I've been a couple of them are my regular meetings for years were men's meetings, and one of them was always a step. So.
Yeah. That's cool. I like speaker meetings as well, but I'm more interested in step. Over the last few years, I've been more interested in step. My home group has a pretty cool format where we have someone from around. I live about 30 minutes from downtown Nashville, Tennessee.
Uh-huh.
And every week we have a different person, not from our home group, come in and they open the meeting. They're allowed to pick 2 pages out of the first 164, read them, and then share on it for 20 minutes. And then that's the opening topic, right? So it's real cool. It's usually about some kind of step, Yeah, I love that. Yeah. And it's also I started discovering over the last few years, especially with my current home group, how important format is because. When I first got sober, it was like a bunch of newcomers, and we didn't really understand much about format. And it was when it was just an open discussion, we'd get out in left field with some of those, right? And
yeah.
So format has been, seeing how vital it is to have certain formats, And I'm not saying I'm not dissing or any the open topic or open discussion meetings in any way. It's real easy for those to get out there sometimes, right? Yeah, man. Go ahead.
In our area, I started a meditation meeting in 2008. We've got a bunch of meditation meetings, AA meditation meetings, and my wife and I started going to one in the mornings in the next town over in Westport. It was a 9:00 meeting, and it had, in my opinion, had the perfect format. Now it's migrated to Zoom now. I go to that AA meditation meeting on Zoom 4 days a week. But the format, I just love this format. So there's a little bit of a reading of a vision for you or the promises in the beginning, and but not a lot of reading. Some meetings you go to, they end up 15 minutes reading all kinds of things. This is just we do one little reading. There's a 10-minute silent meditation.
Nice.
Then there's a 10-minute speaker, and he's timed. Somebody times the whole deal. The guy gets 10 minutes, or the woman gets 10 minutes. That's it. And then if there's whatever time is left, I was at the meeting today, for instance, and it was a small meeting. The Sunday meeting's a little bit smaller at 5:00 in the afternoon. And there was, 21 people in 32 minutes. So they divide it up and they say, okay, everybody gets an hour and 25 seconds. And somebody times them. And that's it. So you get a spiritual reading, or there's a spiritual reading at the beginning. So the book changes every day, and like today it was a speaker's choice of anything out of the first 164 pages, any 2 paragraphs. So we did the selfishness, self-centeredness today, and then we did a meditation, and then the guy talked, and then everybody got a chance to talk. And my sponsor, when he brought me in, he was 25 years sober when I got here, and to my knowledge, when I got here in '81, there was only 2 people in Fairfield County that had 25 years of sobriety, and he was one of them.
Wow!
But so he had a little big stick in terms of meetings, and all the meetings that he took me to, and all the meetings that he participated in, he went to a lot of meetings. The number one thing was everybody had to get a chance to talk. Everybody. Wow. That's the deal. Yeah. Get around the room. We had to get around the room. You don't get around the room, you just lost 3 points out of a scale of 1 to 10.
Nice. That's funny, dude. That's awesome. I I like how you had just shared on, like, a lot of meetings will come in, you get there and you sit there for 15 or 20 minutes on the opening readings. That's another cool part about what our format does in my home group is we read like a little 20-second, 30-second portion out of the member's eye view pamphlet, and then we read the newer version of the preamble, right? And then that opens it up. Other than that, we have a couple little announcements, and then 4 minutes into it, we're ready for the open, for the speaker.
Yeah, you're doing the meeting. All my meetings are like that. I went to this meeting I went to last night where I spoke. They did a couple of readings, and they read chapter 5. I got to tell you, Paul, I've been coming to AA for 43 years, and I've been going to 4 or 5 meetings a week. I've been 9,000 plus meetings probably. Yeah. And if I had to go to 9,000 plus meetings where they read chapter 5 every single time, I would have put my head in the oven or drank long before 43 years.
Yeah.
So that's just me. If it's working for you,
sure.
Alcoholics Anonymous is a program that all we care about is what's working for you to keep you away from a drink today. Yeah. That's our project. Yeah. And if reading chapter 5 at every meeting you go to 6 or 7 days a week, I'm good with it. It's working for you.
Amen. Yeah.
I'm just not going to the meeting. I'm not going to those meetings.
Sure. Yeah. Well, cool, man. What you just touched on, the meditation portion, and we were talking about this last week when we had spoke, and you said, when you first got into Alcoholics Anonymous, you had been the whole transcendental meditation or meditation in general wasn't a part of it. Is that right? Let's talk about when you first got sober. Well, first off, let's start with this. Was you a step guy when you first come into recovery, or did it take a while for you to get a sponsor, or what was that whole process look like when you first got here?
It's funny. As I said, I told my story last night. I always apologize because it's my story, but it's not a recommendation that you do it the way I did it.
Sure.
Because I came to all of this stuff very, very late.
Yeah.
I got a sponsor right away. He was my sponsor for 37 years. He died on August 8th, 2017. Wow. And he and I were kind of joined at the hip. I picked him up and drove him to meetings minimum of 3 times a week. And he was my best friend over and above just being my sponsor. But it was just my men's group that I went to, the Stratford men's group, especially in those days. This has changed now, thankfully. But in those days, it was a fellowship deal, and it was a don't drink and go to meetings deal.
Yeah,
it was a put your hands in your pocket and keep your mouth shut meeting.
Sure.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
and that was it. So I had to ask my sponsor when I was like 5 or 6 months sober. I said, "Can I do a 4th step?"
Yeah.
He was like, oh yeah, if you want to do that. They weren't doing step work at all. Zero. They weren't doing step work at all. They weren't talking about the steps. They weren't talking about the book. They were just talking about not drinking and going to meetings. That was the deal. And I've stayed sober, quite frankly. If I was had to put my finger on one thing that's kept me sober for the last 40 years, it's the fellowship of alcoholics. There's no doubt in my mind that that's the most powerful impact and influence on me not drinking. The closest I ever came to a drink, my sponsor's name was King Dykeman. And the closest I came to a drink, thinking about walking in a liquor store, because I'd gotten this Dear John letter when I was about a year sober. And I just couldn't imagine. I knew I had to tell him I drank if I drank. I don't know where that came from, but I knew I had to do that. I couldn't lie about it or hide it. And I just couldn't imagine doing that, telling him that. So I didn't go in the liquor store that day. Didn't drink. Yeah. It was a fellowship kind of thing. It's that human connection kind of thing that's really worked strongly for me. But I came to all of this stuff really, really slowly. As you and we talked, I'm a guy who has no supernatural elements in my life. I live in a world that's just loaded with mystery. But there's no supreme being. There's no gods or goddesses. There's no angels or devils or ghosts or goblins or leprechauns or fairies. It's just like it's all just mystery. I don't go to the kind of what I think of as I don't mean this to be pejorative, but what I think of as like simple solutions for complicated problems. I revel in in the sacred mystery of just being alive and breathing the world around me. So, of course, we're supposed to be getting on our knees, praying, part of the program. And I was 6 years sober and getting a little snarky about that one day. My sponsor told me that he said I had to get on my knees in the morning. I said, well, I don't pray. He said, look, I don't care. I could care less what you say or do, except I want you to get on your knees, because the proper position for a man begging for sobriety is on his knees.
Wow.
So 6 years sober, I get on my knees for the first time, and I've gotten on my knees every single morning ever since. And in the beginning, I do a bunch of affirmations. In the beginning, it was real simple. I said, good morning to this day. I'm an alcoholic. I don't want to drink today. I'm glad I didn't drink yesterday. With the help of our fellowship and the 12 steps, our spiritual program of action. That was what I said. Now it's changed over the years. Sometimes I usually type up what I'm saying. It's 2 pages long. Today it's about 2/3 of a page long. And basically, I get on my knees in the morning out loud, and I tell myself the kind of guy I want to be that day. That's my spiritual practice in the morning. But I didn't start doing that until I was 6 years sober. I didn't start reading. I read the big book at High Watch, the rehab place I went to. But how much sense does anything make when you're 5 days sober? Focus.
Yeah.
So I didn't read the big book until I was 19 years sober. I didn't do all the steps until I was 21 years sober. I didn't start meditating until I was 26 years sober.
Wow. And
I didn't start getting on my knees every single night until I was about 34 years sober.
Nice. Wow.
So I have a trend line here. It's a good trend line, but it's a long, slow trend.
Yeah. That's interesting. And I also like your concept that you shared with me about the pendulum, like swinging to one side of self-will. You want to share that, or either self-centered or other-centered, right?
Yeah, well, it's not even other-centered, but yeah. I mean, because of my my lack of belief, as I think we talked about this, I really don't like the word atheist, because it kind of puts me in a pigeonhole, and it defines me in terms of your beliefs. And I don't want to be doing that. That's why I say I live in a world without any supernatural element. And let's just leave it at that, But then, because I'm relatively famous for that kind of position in my local AA groups, people come to me, and one of the questions I get from believers all the time is, well, how can you have a spiritual life if you don't believe in God? And I basically have come over the years to for my own personal understanding is that my spirituality is like on a spectrum, back and forth on a pendulum, whatever you want, whatever image works best for you. And all the way over here on the left-hand side, it's all about Bill Shea. It's all about me, And over on the other end of the side, it's not just that it's all about you and other people. It's more about, I mean, all the way over, we're in the real Zen Buddhist territory here, where I'm embedded and I'm just a part of. That's all I am, is a part of. I'm not individuated from, I am a part of.
Yeah.
And I move all over that spectrum on an hourly basis.
Yeah.
But the more spiritual I am, the more I am towards I'm being a part of. And the less spiritual I am, the more I am, it's all about me, and I'm being cranky about things that I got no right to be cranky about.
Yeah, nice, interesting. I tell you, like, for me, I don't, whether I call it, I'm not, and of course, like, I'm all over the spectrum as well. And also I realize that just because something feels or I believe a certain thing today, I realize that I could find out by the end of this episode that my mind's changed, right? And so, like, I'm not so sure that I've ever really experienced any situation where it was necessary for me to call it God. Mystery I like the word mystery. Like, don't get me wrong, I think the word God has a lot of baggage with it. And I mean, at the end of the day, like, especially when I'm working with certain new guys, like, the question is do I have the sufficient power to stay sober? And, like, is there one if I don't have it, right? And I think sometimes that's principles, right? It's like it's spiritual principles or spiritual principles. Am I applying these principles in my life? And if I do, what happens, right? Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. It really, really does. And a whole lot of that, in my opinion, like my flat out best advice is if you want to stay sober is do what you're told.
Yeah, there you go.
So when my sponsor told me to get on my knees when I was 6 years sober, I got on my knees. That's what I did. I didn't like it, but I did it because that's what because he came off the bench and told me to do that, and I don't know, I think one of my favorite, I heard an AA speaker one time and he said, identify the places where you encounter God and go there often.
Yeah.
I'm not a God guy. So I immediately morphed that into and identify the places where you encounter the spiritual and go there often. Yeah. And man, that thing has been driving my life for over 20 years. That's a beautiful thing.
Nice.
It's a beautiful thing. If you get your spiritual radar unit up and start tuning it in to different things in different places where the spiritual can be a part of your life, where you can experience that. And, sometimes it's just doing what you're told. It's a spiritual act. But there's all kinds of different ways of doing that.
Absolutely.
But I really do. I can't tell you how often talking to people, I talk about the fact that, identify the places where you encounter the spiritual and go there often. You could be encountering the spiritual in completely different places from me. At least 4 of the guys I sponsor are completely different from me as they understand what a spiritual experience is for them. But I'm a little bit more prosaic.
Yeah. Gotcha.
I said last night when I was speaking, my wife, the lady Sarah, walked into the meeting when I was just a little under 4 years sober, and I was immediate. I mean, there was electricity across the room, let me tell you. And I thought, oh, please, God, let that woman have just moved here from Rhode Island and have 3 years of sobriety. And it gets to her, and she said, my name is Sarah, and I'm 6 days sober. And I was like, oh, you got to be kidding me. You got to be kidding me. And it was a mutual kind of electricity across the room. But I waited for 359 days and 1 second before I kissed that woman, and I went home with her, and we've been together ever since.
Wow.
Now, if you don't think that's a spiritual exercise for 359 days, then you and I don't agree on what a spiritual experience is.
Yeah.
But it was that's what it was for me.
Yeah.
That's what I had to do. That's what I had to do because, again, I was told to do that.
Yeah. Nice.
Stay away from it. Stay away. You stay away from that. I don't even want to see you hugging that woman at a meeting. I stay away from it. Okay.
It's so true what you're saying, which is exactly. I mean, if you look at Tradition 12, anonymity is a spiritual foundation. It's saying to set your personal agenda aside, right? Practice these principles over the personality, which is definitely a spiritual practice. I mean, if that's not, I don't know what is, right? And it's cool.
Yeah, exactly.
It's cool because, like, I always share. I have the privilege of going to a treatment center pretty often, and when I go in there, I always share with the guys. Like, I think probably one of probably the biggest thing that's ever changed my life. I do tend to, call it God for the most part. It depends on who I'm talking to and how effective I think it will be.
Yeah.
But one of the biggest things probably the most important thing that changed my life was learning how to ask for help. My first sponsor, the meeting I first got sober in, we was not a step meeting as well, right? The fellowship that I've got from that particular home group saved my life, especially the relationship I had with my first sponsor. And I was probably 16 months sober before I did my first 4-step, right? And I'm not saying like I recommend that. If it worked for me, that's all I know. It worked for me. And at the end of the day, but he used to tell me 3 things. Paul, we do these 3 things on a daily basis. We go to meetings, we work with others, and we ask for help. Right? But asking for help was so big because it goes into what you're talking about, like learning. It's funny because like since I learned, which I wasn't good at, and I'm still not sometimes, learning how to ask for help. When I started applying that to my life, things slowly started changing, right? Which is huge. Yeah, it's like I got out of the way. It's funny because we used to talk about how my first grand sponsor, he would say, I don't have the power to go outside. When it said came to believe in a power greater than ourselves, he'd say, I don't have the power to go outside and walk across the street with my car. But if all 30 or 40 of us go out there, we may have a better chance, right? He was like, so the power is in this group or however it's going to show up, right? And, so I completely get that. let's just talk a little bit about meditation and like what you think that like the benefits have come from since you started meditating.
Well, again, I was talking about this last night when I was speaking, and I said, there's been two major seismic turning points in my adult life, and the first one was on December 7th, 1981, when I stopped drinking. And the second one was the first week of March 2008 when I started meditating. I just can't tell you I can't explain it. I can draw a straight line from not drinking to the benefits, I mean, I got more money. I don't have hangovers. I know where my car is. There's all kinds of, you don't need a dotted line for that kind of thing. But the meditation thing is so much more, it's ephemeral. It's not something you can point to and touch and say, there it is. That's the thing. All I know is I started sitting, I tried to sit by myself, and in March of 2008, that was not working. I had lost my skill set for doing stuff by myself, so I started a meditation meeting. Got like 15 people the first week, and that meeting's still going on. And we would read either the 11th step out of the big book one week, and the 12 and 12 the next week, and then we would sit for 10 minutes in silence. Then somebody would run the meeting and talk about a meditation topic. We'd go around, and then we'd sit for 10 minutes at the end. So, but I started sitting in the mornings for different periods of time. At the moment, I'm doing 15 minutes. I do 15 minutes every single morning. I do 15 minutes, and my wife and I sit every night together after dinner for 15. We do silent meditation. The mornings, I read 3 different things to get myself kind of in the zone before I sit to meditate. These days, I read the Daily Stoic. I read two different. I read a poem a day by a different poet, and I'm always reading Mary Oliver. Mary Oliver poems, like every other one, just smacks me up the side of the head and says, get out of your self-centered thing and pay attention to what's going on around you. Yeah. He's just great. He's just great for that stuff, and I need to hear that on a daily basis. Nice. So I don't know. It was funny that yesterday morning I was downstairs before I meditated. I had a cup of hot coffee, breakfast. I don't know, Paul. I don't know what happened. Now, I've been sober a long time. I've been alive a long time. I'm 81 years old, but I've never had this happen to me before. And that was, I started thinking about how old I am and how good my health is compared to a whole bunch of people who are 15 years younger than me. They're in bad shape, and the fact that I'm still alive and doing well. And all of a sudden, I started noticing a whole bunch of different things. And I went into I don't know how to describe it except to say it was like a tsunami of gratitude. I've never been there before. I mean, it wasn't an out-of-body experience, but it was getting in that direction. Let me tell you, I was just like, I was sitting there. I've got I make really, really strong coffee. I got this wonderful cup of coffee. I'm like grateful for that. My wife just got us a whole bunch of hand-picked fresh blueberries. I got it on shredded wheat with milk. Man, that was just fabulous. We got 2 cats. Oh my God, they're sad. And I sit at the window in the morning. At night, I sit on a cushion, but in the morning, I sit in a chair and I look outside a 30 by 30 window. Nice. And I just pay attention to what's going on outside in that 30 by 30 section. Everything. I've been doing that that's been my morning practice for about, I don't know, probably 8 years now. Wow. And, but it was funny. When Sarah, I didn't talk to Sarah about it yesterday when it happened, but I mentioned it at the meeting when I spoke last night. And today she said, I was really glad to hear you say that. And I said, the hard thing is it's almost impossible to talk about. And she said, what that comes from is meditating and making yourself available and being open. And she's told me about a couple of times where she's had those powerful, just overwhelmed with gratitude for her life and for being alive. And she said the only way that happens is if you allow meditation to open your heart up. Wow. I live with a fabulous woman.
Sounds like it. Wow. Interesting, man. That's awesome. Luckily, when I first got sober, probably 90 days in, my first grand sponsor used to say, you either grow spiritually or, you're on your way to a drink pretty much. He didn't say those exact words, but that's what I heard. Right. And, so I used to, I just do a little research, and I was just seeking and seeking and seeking. And about 90 days in, I started meditating on a pretty regular basis. And I'll tell you, like, I was into a whole lot of legal trouble, and my mind was torturous. I was not just drinking alcohol, but I was just doing other substances and stuff, and I'd been doing them for years. And like, so my mind was just constantly torturous. This is to say wasn't very nice to myself internally. The internal dialogue I had was ridiculous, right? And I tell you, like, so before I even worked any of the steps or any of that, I started experiencing freedom just through meditating and going deep into, the depth of my being, and, learning how to form relationships with my feelings and my thoughts and all that, and realizing, I could live from a deeper space to where I had some pretty unbelievable experiences. And it's funny because, like, when I'm working with guys, like these guys that I sponsor, not every guy is ready to hear any of that. Sometimes it takes a minute for a guy to really get to a space where he can hear what you're saying with that, and I learned, I learned through, like, just experience not to push that on guys until, when they're ready, they'll be ready, right? That's good stuff, man. That's good stuff. So what about sponsorship? Let's talk about, like, so you currently sponsor guys or what?
Yeah, I've got, 6 or 7 guys I sponsor. I haven't sponsored a newcomer in a long time. Now, I don't know, maybe that's a product of doing Zoom meetings since COVID. But all the guys I sponsor, Billy, the guy who's the speaker seeker that got me to speak last night, he's 18 years sober, and I sponsored him for 17 of those years, the last 17 of these years.
Nice.
He's the youngest guy I got. Everybody else is, a couple of them are over 40, and the rest of them are in the 30-year brackets,
Yeah.
But my home group, the Stratford Men's Group, for 37 years, was serious. When I say it was fellowship, it was a sponsorship thing. You had to have a sponsor, and you had to be working with your sponsor. That was a deep dive built into the system at the Stratford Men's Group. So I got guys. A guy called me today. He turned 60 years old tomorrow. He's been calling me since he got sober at 22.
Wow.
He calls me 3 or 4 times a week.
Nice.
I'm 22. What's that? So what? He's like 38 years sober.
Wow.
He's still calling me all the time. I call my sponsor with regularity, and another guy that I picked up. Long story on how that happened. He was 10 or 12 years sober at the time, and I've been sponsoring him, and he's got to have 32 years, and he calls me 3 or 4 times a week.
Yeah.
So we have a very active relationship with sponsorship. One of the ways that the Stratford Men's Group drove that was we had anniversary night at the last Monday of the month, and your sponsor would give you the coin. If you didn't have a sponsor, you could get a coin.
Yeah.
And when the sponsor gave a coin, he would typically do a review of how well you'd done in the past year. Sometimes that was loaded with praise with a little bit of criticism, and sometimes it was all criticism.
Yeah.
So it was a big deal in the way people were staying sober in the Stratford Men's Group. It was a fellowship program based on sponsorship. And Clancy Isman, the great AA circuit speaker,
Yeah.
he always says when he goes around the country talking, if he hits these pockets of enthusiasm for Alcoholics Anonymous, which aren't available to him everywhere, they hit a pocket of enthusiasm. He said they always have a strong tradition of sponsorship.
Yeah.
I thought that was interesting because that had been my experience, but I was probably 10 or 12 years sober when the first time I heard Clancy say that on a tape recording.
Well, I love it when he talks about this pocket of enthusiasm. It's so true. I mean, for me, I think like a big part of my sobriety was I'd ran into one of those, and it has a whole different energy, right? I mean, like when you get a pocket of enthusiasm, it's different. My first grant sponsor used to always talk about how important it was to fall in love with the program. He was like, if you don't fall in love with this thing, you're not going to do it for 30 years, right? I mean, it's just that simple. And it's funny because all the stuff he always shared with me, every bit of it ended up coming true, right? And in the beginning, it was like, come on, me and you were talking earlier before we got on here about how it was interesting that my grand sponsor had pretty much gotten sober, a year or so after I was born, but yet I came in and I was so delusional. I felt like I knew more about sobriety than he did,
You're a real alcoholic here, Paul.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. And thank God that there was just people willing to share their lives with me, right? Because I luckily landed into a pocket of enthusiasm like that, and those guys were just willing and seeking, and they realized how important it was for their life to have purpose, just like I've discovered over the last, years of sponsoring guys. I've been sponsoring guys now for a little over 6 years, and looking back on, like, he used to always drill to me, like, how many guys you working with, Paul? How many guys you working with? How many guys you working with? He used to drive me crazy. And now I realize, like, man, thank God that the purpose that comes with, sharing my life with another person, and it has so much purpose and benefits that come with it. It's undescribable, right?
Yeah. Paul, I'd like to circle back on the meditation thing, because it's just one of the most powerful tools we've got. My wife, one time we were at our little meditation meeting, and it came around, and she said, what's happened with me with meditation is, did they talk about the spiritual toolkit? She said, meditation has turned those tools into power tools. And I was like, nice. Floored. I thought that was such a cool thing.
So true.
And she was so on it, But I don't know, sitting quietly. Now, there's different ways of doing this, and people do it different ways. But I sit in silence because that's the way Jay Stinnett told me I was supposed to be doing it. And he was the guy who got me going on meditation. And I'm sitting in silence, and I it's not that I quiet my mind. I've never gotten to a point where my mind isn't chattering to me at one point or another, but I need to just let those things go when they come up, and they just keep, these uninvited thoughts keep coming up, and I just let them go. Yeah. But, as my experience is, as I let the garbage stuff go, the monkey chatter stuff go, every so often I get what in the Oxford group they used to call guidance. They thought they got guidance directly from God. Well, I don't get it directly from God, I don't think, but when I try to quiet my mind, frequently something more serious comes up, a problem I've been trying to deal with, or a sponsee that I wish I could figure out what to say to him that would be helpful to him. And I'll be sitting and meditate, and all of a sudden, bingo, someone will come up and say, oh, that's what I should do.
Yeah.
That's what I should say. That's what I should stop doing. I get these moments, these flashes of clarity with some regularity. And in our house, we kind of tongue-in-cheek, we say, oh, Sarah will say, I got some guidance meditating today. And then she'll tell me that, we're something very mundane, we're going to go do something on Thursday, that she wants to get done. I was like, okay, honey, we can do that, but I find just paying attention to the crazy things that are going on in my head all day long when I'm not paying attention to it. Is very, 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 very revealing and very, 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 very helpful. It's like, I heard a guy at our meetings for years and years and years, and he said, don't believe everything you think.
Amen.
Well, you got to be paying attention to what's going on in your head to know what the wheat from the chaff, you need to separate that stuff out. Don't believe everything you think.
Yeah, Bob B.
Anyhow.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. I love that. Bob B. always says, we got to jump on every train that comes through the station, right? And that's the key to it. It's like, man, but if you don't have enough space, like if you don't, just see what happens through the process, then you do. You don't really have an option but to jump on every train, really, right? I mean, my experience said that anyway. So I love.
I do the train option too. We live about 50 miles out in New York, and the train goes right into New York. So I frequently picture myself standing on the platform and letting the trains go by. Yeah. But sometimes the train stops and I get on and I go to New York. Sometimes I go to New Jersey, for God's sake. It's just.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. You said you'd mentioned that your wife had mentioned something about available. I love that word, and that has continued to show up over the last year in my life about how, this whole podcast was actually something where, like, I tell people, like, I I'm not the most qualified to do something like this, but what I am is I was available and something happened. I got, a matter of fact, I was like, no, I can't do a podcast. I don't got time for that. I don't have this. I don't have that. Right. And then all of a sudden, like it kept showing up and I was available and here it is. Right. And, so I love, like, you're right. Like it's about really opening up space, opening my mind and becoming available to see what happens. Right. And when it shows up, it's either time to do it or not. So I love that.
Yeah.
It's big stuff.
Yeah, it's when we sit at night, Sarah normally reads something. We normally have a book that she reads a page or a page and a half, just a little bit out of some usually a Buddhist book.
Yeah.
But a meditation kind of book. And the one we were reading recently, they consistently talked about one of the things you want to be doing with your meditation practice is focusing on opening your heart up.
Oh yeah.
At different times during the day, not just when you're meditating, but what you want to do is open your heart up.
Yeah.
And I found that really, I'm a word guy, so every so often things get packaged in a different sentence, in a different sound group, in a different bunch of verbs and nouns, and it catches my attention in a way, I've been hearing that over and over again, but it didn't catch my attention. And all of a sudden, open in your heart. I can visualize my heart opening up.
Yeah.
It's not really my heart, which is left to center in my chest, but there's, I think, right in the dead center of my chest, it always feels to me like there's a center of awareness.
Amen.
And attention.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm trying to open up when I'm trying to do that. Now, of course, my experience with meditation is I get all excited about something like opening your heart, and it works for me for 3 days, 3 weeks, or 3 months, and then it ain't working anymore, and I need to find something else to go and crank into. I don't understand people who get in a rut and they stay in the rut and they say it's working for them. Now, if it's working for you, we're all in favor of it. But that's not how I operate. It's not my normal modus of operandi. So.
Interesting. Yeah, I get that. So you just touched on the Buddhist book, or what? So let's talk about some of your favorite daily readers, or if you do have some, or like just over the years, what have you found really, really useful in your personal life?
Yeah, well, I've been through a whole bunch of different Buddhist books and authors. Stephen Batchelor, who's still alive and doing retreats. I've been on 3 retreats with Stephen Batchelor, and he's written a number of books. His most popular book probably is Buddhism Without Beliefs. And he spent a bunch of time in a Tibetan monastery and then in a Korean Zen monastery. Decades. And he's a profoundly spiritual guy. Our favorite reader, though, between Sarah and I is a woman named Charlotte Joko Beck. Joko Beck, everybody calls her Joko Beck. And she died, I don't know, 10 or 12 years ago. But she wrote 3 books. She wrote a book called Everyday Zen, and then she wrote a book called Nothing Special. And then after she died, her daughter put together a book out of a whole bunch of recordings called Ordinary Wonder.
Wow.
And I think that Ordinary Wonder book is just Sarah's reading a page and a half every night. We get through the book the first time, and we look at each other, and I said, I think we should probably start this book over again tomorrow. And she was like, oh, yeah, we got to do that. Yeah, we got to do that. Nice. So it's the only book we've ever done that with,
That's Ordinary Wonder? Is that what you said it was? Ordinary Wonder, yeah. She's not... she is a Zen Buddhist supposedly, but she got a bunch of Vipassana stuff in there, and she's got a bunch of psychology in there that's just breathtaking, in my opinion. I mean, it just really, really applies to me in a way that I find shocking when we're going through. So, she's really, really a great, great, great writer. Nice.
I said I read Daily Stoic every day. The Stoics have a lot of problems. I'm a philosophy guy. I mean. I wrote a book on the German philosopher Nietzsche, published in '95, and I sell rare books, but I only sell first edition philosophy books. So that's kind of where I go here, and the Daily Stoic is interesting. There's a bunch of things they talk about I don't really like. There's way too much emphasis on rationality and reason and blah blah blah. But what they're deadly on is the third step what do I have some control over, and what don't I have anything control over? And the fact of the matter is, the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. But the things you cannot change are like 95% or 97% of things that happen in your life.
Yeah.
And then there's the other things you need a little bit of courage to actually get off the bench and do something about it when you can do something about it.
Yeah.
But they're really, really, really good about rubbing your nose in how, pay attention to what you can do something about.
Yeah.
And the stuff, if you've got no control over the stuff, just get over it. Just get over it. And I need to be reminded of that every single day. I mean, I think of that as third step stuff. And
Nice.
and I personally, we've been sober a long time. I think the third step is where rubber meets the road here, and it's I've been through a bunch of different understandings of that. The whole turn it over thing turned me off. I couldn't figure out what was going on for me or how to morph that into something that would work for me. And then early on, I heard somebody say, you need to just let it go. And I worked with that for a long time. That, let it go or be dragged. Oh, yeah, that made sense to me. I was being dragged on a whole bunch of things, and I was like, are you being dragged on this, William? Yeah, you're being dragged on a whole bunch of. This is one of those things you need to let go of. But then my Buddhist teacher, we were going to a Buddhist Sangha for years,
Wow.
Sarah and I, and my Buddhist teacher told me to read this book by a Tibetan guy, and I don't care much for the Tibetans. They're the Roman Catholics of Buddhism. and it was just, I hated the book, but she told me to read it, so I read it. And what I had one takeaway from it. And so what I realized was I've been letting stuff go, but when I let stuff go, at least this is how I operate, when I was letting stuff go, I knew that it had been my thing, and I mean, it was really my thing, but I was going to let it go. But I had this thread, this string that attached to it. I had let it go and it was over there, but I could pull it back anytime I wanted.
That's funny.
And the takeaway I got from this Tibetan Buddhist book was the guy said, that's letting go, that's a problem. He said, what you need to do is let it be. If you let it be, it's over there someplace and it's got nothing to do with you. Nothing.
Nice.
And that's my third step understanding these days.
Wow.
That and the fact that I say, I was at a meeting the other day and they said, thy will be done. And I think thy will be done is a 4-word shorthand for the third step. That's what we're talking about. Thy will be done. My shorthand for the third step is I say welcome out loud.
Nice.
Something goes south on me, I just spill stuff in the kitchen. Rather than getting angry about it, and I just say welcome.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Nice.
Welcome.
Yeah.
The computer goes south on me for an hour, and it takes me that an hour. I just out of my day trying to get the computer going. I'm trying to say welcome. I'm maybe saying it through gritted teeth, but that's what I'm doing. It's welcome, welcome, welcome. It's shorthand for thy will be done, which is shorthand for the third step, as it says in our big book. So. Yeah,
it's funny because meditation has really given me the ability to do stuff like that. And I started small, whether it was having to set at a red light longer than what I wanted or whatever, right? And and also I really didn't have a good understanding on the things I could or couldn't change until that changed. What I could and couldn't changed through the process of meditation. And one of the things I loved about Buddhism is they don't give you any particular doctrines or something to believe, but they really teach you just how to have a direct experience with reality as it shows up, right? And
amen.
It's wow.
Amen.
This is the whole thing. It's I don't have to believe in anything, but if you get into some of these practices, your life will completely change because you're going to see that whether it's I'm upset because the computer won't start or so-and-so doesn't do what I want, whatever it is, you see how I have a relationship towards that's an internal thing. And I have a direct experience with this, and they teach you how to have an experience with reality, right? Which is game changer, right?
Yeah. No, I said earlier, I've had 2 major seismic things happen in my adult life. I stopped drinking one day, and I started meditating another day. So those are the big deals, and it just helps you I mean, I make bookmarks out of things that I read that I really like. And one of my Joko Bet bookmarks is, she says the point of practice. When she says practice, she means a meditation practice. She says the point of practice is to reduce the amount of time we spend lost in our self-centered dreams.
Amen. Yeah.
Oh man! Oh man! Oh man! I
awesome.
think about. I got a bookmark, so I got at least every so often I got to notice the damn bookmark. I say, okay, that's what I'm going to pay attention to today.
Yeah.
When I'm sitting here, at least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny because I haven't got into a whole lot of philosophy, although I do love philosophy. Since I first got sober, I was a big Alan Watts guy. I still am, and I can listen to some Alan Watts. Man, like something about that man just walks me into just a deeper space where it's like, wow. I don't take myself so serious. You know, he talks about the complexity of, you know, taking myself so serious and how joy is just beneath it, right? And there's something special about that. You like Alan?
I've never done Alan Watts. Sarah's done him, I know, but she hasn't done him in probably 30 or 40 years. So we're both children of the 60s. I'm older than she is by 7 years, so gotcha. I was a little older in the 60s than she was. But yeah, we're children of the 60s here. So Alan Watts is a big part of that for sure.
Yeah, cool, man, cool. Yeah. Well, cool, man. I've just talking to Jay over the last few weeks too has really been cool. He's such an interesting guy, and I'm going to get both of y'all on here together to where y'all can.
He and I talked today. He called me and we were talking, and I said that you had told me that you were hoping to find a date where the three of us, could talk.
Yeah.
And I'd be happy to do that. Jay's got a tougher. I mean, I'm in the middle of, you know, all kinds of different things here with my writing the big book and the 30 Things book, the Practical Advice for Living Well I just published, and the Step Work Group guide that I've done. So there's all those things that are incoming all the time, and then I'm selling rare books on the side and trying to write something new. So I'm a busy guy. But Jay, because of the movie Bill W. Conscious Contact that he just produced and released, maybe 3 months ago.
Yeah.
And Jay's really, really, really busy. He's got a busy schedule, but he's hanging in there.
Yeah.
And Jay and I've been friends for 20 plus years, and
nice.
We talk to each other a couple of times a week, every week over those 20 plus years. So,
that's cool.
So yeah. Love to do that.
Yeah, let's do it. What I'll do is I'll send you and him both some dates, and then I'll have us that are available, and then y'all can jump on, you know, maybe a couple of them or whatever you are willing to do, to where y'all can see what y'all's schedules look like. It looks like it'll probably be sometime in December. You know, I'll send y'all some dates, and if that we'll make it work somehow. If we need to pick other dates, we'll pick other dates. Yeah, cool, Bill. I love this, man. I really enjoy your take. I love the mystery of how you explain stuff. I love how you use the word mystery, because that's really what it is. I think that if you're not open enough to realize that's what it is, then, you know, there's some... I think it's something Alan Watts used to always say when you talk about the ego. He said, "Is a zebra black with white stripes or white with black?" Right? And what he was saying is if you really think you know the answer to that, then you should reevaluate it. You know? Yeah. So it's really a mystery, man. Like, you know, and it's funny. It's, you know, it just so happens that, you know, I choose to call a lot of it God. You know, and But he's extremely anonymous in my life, and, you know, thank God he doesn't need me to believe in order for him to be, you know, in my life, and something, whatever it is, I don't care what you call it, you know, something's there, and it's working, you know. So,
and you got to be working it all the time. You know, it's not. Yeah. It just. I mean, my favorite story in the big book is Jim putting the whiskey in his milk.
Yeah.
And you know, the page before that, Jim's been slipping and sliding. That's not his first slip. And the elders are gathered together to try and figure out what Jim's problem is. The elders in these days probably had all of 2 years or 2.5 years of sobriety, and they conclude that Jim's problem is he failed to enlarge his spiritual life.
Yeah.
Enlarge is an ongoing thing. It's not like you just get it and you got it. You know.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, the point is that we're willing to grow along spiritual lines.
Yeah.
It's an action word. You got to keep doing it. I got to keep doing it. I keep backsliding all the time, and I got to find a new way to jack myself up again and get back in the game. And move the spectrum, move the needle more over into the inclusive thing rather than the isolated Bill Shaber thing, you know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there we go.
Well, I love how you mentioned earlier, you said, you're all over the spectrum within any given hour, right? And I love that because, like me and my sponsor always talk about how important the transparency is. Like, having a touch of righteousness is kind of a turn off for me. Don't get me wrong. I shouldn't say a touch. I think all of us have a touch somewhere. But the transparency of realizing that I'm not leaning over towards the others or I could be all over the spectrum in any given moment, right? I love that, which is huge, right? So,
yeah. Amen.
Thank you so much, man, and I will stay in touch with you. Let's just stay, I'll just stay in contact and let's talk a little bit and come up with some cool ideas and go from there. And I'll send you and the best way to get a hold of you still email. Is that the best way?
Yeah, I'm an email guy. Okay. Absolutely, drop dead. That's the very best way to get a hold of me is email.
Okay, great. Yeah, so thank you so much, Bill, and I will talk to you next time. And I'll send you some dates this week.
Excellent, Paul. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Yes, sir.
Okay?
Yes, sir. You too. Have a wonderful night.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hello. Thank you for listening to 3 Legacies Recovery Recordings. If you enjoy our program, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to share with a friend. We're also self-supporting, so feel free to contribute to the channel through Venmo at Recovery Recordings 615. Please note that the views expressed on this podcast are solely our individual views and do not represent any official stance of any 12-step program. We are not affiliated with any specific recovery organization, and this content should not be considered as professional advice for alcoholism or addiction.